in the 60s, there was a revival in movement where many people repented and gave their lives to Jesus. And during that time, there was also a revival in Soviet Union. And then our people heard about the news of the persecuted church, that people didn't have Bibles, and that many pastors and believers were in prisons. And I think the Lord gave it as a burden on the hearts of many Finnish brothers and sisters who began to pray for the persecuted church. There was a brother by the name Dale, and he was working in Eastern Europe, and then they began to work in the Soviet Union. So we call him one of the founders of this ministry. And before the work began, he had two very troubling questions. One was that, is it biblically correct to smuggle? Because then you are in situations where you have to hide things. Can this be justified? And he read through the entire Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, with this question: is it biblically correct to smuggle the Word of God? And after he had completed the reading the Bible, he came to the conclusion that yes, it is. The second question was more difficult, because he understood that if we as foreigners from the Western world start to do this work, eventually things will go wrong. We will make mistakes, we don't know the languages, and things will happen, so that as a consequence of our work, the suffering church will suffer even more. And his troubling question was, is it fair if we start this work and as a result, the brothers and sisters will only have more suffering? So he decided to travel in different former communist countries with this question in mind. He told me that when he went to Poland, he was in a small room and there was a group of men sitting in a circle. And he turned to the person next to him and asked, have you been in prison for your faith? And this old Polish man said yes. He asked the second one, have you been in prison? He said yes. He asked the third one, the same answer. And then one interrupted and said, we all have been in prison for our faith. And then one took an apple that was on the table and said, there were many years that I did not see one apple because they didn't supply these in the prisons. And then this brother Dale asked these men the question, is it fair if we start to bring the Word of God, things go wrong, and you will suffer even more? And how these men answered? They said, it's not fair if you choose not to come, and by choosing not to come, you rob us the joy and the possibility of for suffering for the Lord Jesus Christ. And that changed everything. In my childhood, I thought that my life as a child is normal, because a child always thinks that the family that he's in, that this is how everybody lives when you are little. I only then later on realized that our family life was not. I remember once as a young boy, I was playing in the backyard and the door was always locked. But that, maybe it was Sunday afternoon, it was open. And so I thought, okay, now I will walk in to see. And I walked through this building toward the end of it. And there were boxes from the floor up to the ceiling, and only small corridors that went through this room. I don't know if there were 2 or 3 truckloads of Bibles, but it was full. And then as I walked and I looked around the corner, I could see the feet of a man on the floor. And I peeked and I looked and I saw my father praying on his knees between these piles of Bibles, that God would open the way, that this literature could go through the Iron Curtain. And I quietly came out. I never told my father that I saw him there. And now looking back, I think God allowed me to see him on his knees, because that touched my heart deeply. And I understood that in this ministry, or any ministry, but particularly in this one, you must begin on your knees. In our mission, we had a secret department that covered the former Soviet Union and then the Eastern European countries, all countries behind the wall of Berlin. And from this, the work was coordinated. Brother Pentti Heinilä was one of the leaders of this work. In the beginning, they were carrying the Bibles inside of their jackets or around their belts or double floors on suitcases. Women had high-heeled shoes where they could put a film inside.
Uusi testamentti kummallakin puolella ja sitten oli tässä vähän väljät housut ja sen alapuolella oli ympäri. Siinä meni vähän yli 20 uutta testamenttia.
You didn't feel that was enough?
Se ei ollut tarpeeksi. Sitten mennessä jouduin.
Then Brother Antti developed automobile benzene tanks, that half of the tank was benzene and the other half was Bibles. And little by little, these systems got bigger and bigger. Oftentimes they were discovered and the vehicles were confiscated. Then they started to build camping automobiles and camping caravans. And down there in Leusheni, at the Soviet border, one of our automobiles was confiscated, and then because they discovered the Bibles. And then a little later, another automobile with a camper caravan that had also this built-in system where the Bibles were hidden was discovered. And because of these difficulties, we as a mission were building new systems, and the KGB was discovering them and confiscating. And this battle became very difficult. And many of our workers were volunteers and they were put on the blacklist. They couldn't get visa and then they couldn't travel anymore. And then my father and Brother Antti, they both had been doing this with their groups separately, and they were part of the same movement, but they didn't know each other. Then my father, after he had done several of these trips to Leningrad, he met with another brother, Brother Antti, in Finland at the men's conference. Brother Antti had been already doing this work to Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, and my father had also, but they didn't know about each other. And we had a very strict rule or principle that we never ever share secrets about our work. And now during the lunch break of this conference, Brother Antti and my father met on the stairway to the dining area. And then Antti told me later that as he saw my father, they engaged in just discussion, and very soon their discussion went into Soviet Union. And Brother Antti said to my father that there has been a thought that if we could use trucks for smuggling Bibles, because with these small automobiles it's so difficult. And my father spontaneously said that let's start to do this, and we can start exporting lumber, construction materials to Israel. My father had this business, so he had been exporting in a commercial way to Israel. And they had this meeting and discussion. It was probably 45 minutes to an hour. And then later on, Antti said that he was surprised that he broke this rule that we had, that he shared about his own activities, and my father did the same. They exchanged the telephone numbers, and then my father, maybe he had an inner struggle that is this from God or not. And he proposed to Brother Antti that he will do one more trip to Leningrad, and with an automobile that has a benzene tank where the Bibles are hidden. Just before that, such a system had been discovered at the Soviet border, and the Bibles were confiscated, and the automobile. And we had a policy that if they ever discover a system, because we had these tanks in many cars, and we had similar systems in different cars, But if they ever discover a secret system, then we never use that system in another car into the same country, because it was guaranteed that they would discover it. So my father said to Antti that I will take the benzene tank one more time. If it goes through, then we start this work, and if I get caught, then it's a sign from God that I have done my part. And I remember, as a 17-year-old boy, we traveled to the city of Savonlinna, where Brother Antti lived. And then my sister and I stayed with Antti. My parents, with the younger siblings of mine, got into this automobile and left for Leningrad. And Brother Antti then shared afterwards that when he saw the back lights of this car disappearing, he thought that how could I make such mistake and allow him to go? Because in a couple of days' time, he will be returning by foot, and the car will be lost, and everything will be finished. Well, it was then Sunday evening when my father came back, and he had gone through the border, and the Bibles were delivered. And my father took this as a sign from God, and then they began to build this operation. They bought a truck, and then the plan was that with the trucks we start to smuggle Bibles in.
Ca atare, noi cunoștință n-am făcut cum fac de obicei oamenii. Se întâlnesc, dau mână, se prezintă unul altul. Lucrurile astea nu erau prin anii 80 primite. Noi ne întâlneam noaptea, ne stăruim să nu întrebăm numele, de unde vin, unde se duc și mai departe, din scopuri de conspirație. Dar ideea s-a apărut de motive că era un deficit foarte mare de literatură, de Biblii, de cărți pentru copii, absolut. Biblii poate era una la familie, de care și poate nu în toate familiile erau, și frații păstori au făcut legături cu niște misionari din străinătate, unele misiuni care au ajuns la înțelegerea că să încerce să aducă Biblii cu camioane.
Brother Pentti had met with Brother Mihail Horev and some of the leaders of the underground Baptist movement. And they had arranged this plan. And then Brother Antti, he flew to Odessa with a Finnish tourist on a vacation trip. And then he secretly came from Odessa to Chisinau. And then the brothers from the Baptist Church of Chisinau went with Brother Antti to different places around the city to look for such a place where this 22-meter long truck from Finland could come, and then the small trucks from your brothers could come to that place and then receive the Bibles. So this place was prepared. So my father and Brother Antti knew. Of course, they couldn't have a map, but they had memorized how to come to that place. So this is the headquarters of the secret operation. This is Antti's home, and around this table we would always sit down and look at the maps of Europe and make our plans.
Tämä on Venäjän kartta, mutta
Finland is way up here. Ja millais Antti meni ensin
Leningradiin ja siitä Moskovaan, sitten Tulaa, Orjol ja Kiev ja siitä sitten tuosta Kisinev ja sitten on Romania siellä.
Ja sieltä Bulgaria ja Kreikkaa.
Did you drive that route?
Joo, tätä reittiä ajettiin joka kerran.
That was the only road that he was allowed to drive in Soviet Union, because in Soviet Union you couldn't choose yourself. They told you the road, so that was the road that Antti then drove. So in the very beginning, Bibles were brought to Finland from Germany, from Sweden, in Russian, in German, in Ukrainian, in Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, many former Soviet languages. Kazakh, Uzbek, Kyrgyz, it was a mixture. And and it wasn't only Bibles, it was New Testaments, Gospels, Christian booklets. So this was the first Bible that Antti was taking there, but it's very small print. And the brother said that there are a lot of old people who are not able to read that. So then they started to make a little bit of a bigger size of Bible with bigger text. So these are some of the first ones that were taken into the country.
Tuossa oli yksi Uusi testamentti.
This is a New Testament.
Tuossa oli lastenraamattu, jota vietiin silloin paljon, joka oli hyvin, hyvin kysyttyä.
And then Antti transported Gospels. This is a Gospel of John. And then he transported tracts. This is a tract that was used for evangelism. And so I grew up on a farm, and we had an old horse barn where my grandfather had horses. And this barn was then turned into a Bible warehouse. And then next to our farm was the lumber mill, and there was a building in which during the nights my father and brother Antti then prepared these special lumber piles where they would hide the Bibles. The bottom of it was real wood, and the side and the top. But then in the middle were only about 30 or 40 centimeter long pieces, and that created this hollow, empty spot in the middle, which was then filled with the Bibles, and then real wood again on the top, and then these metal straps around it. On the truck and the trailer, the top piles were these hollow piles with Bibles, and the rest of the load was real wood that was then going to go down to Israel. In Finland we had freedom, so that was not a problem. It was not a problem to have a Russian Bible, but of course this operation was not legal. So they had to, the difficulty was that they couldn't do it during the day because there were other workers, so they had to prepare during the nights, which meant that they, just before the trip, they had very short nights because it took them, I don't know how many, but it took them many nights to prepare this transport. So now we are in a place that was the secret base as a base of operation, and from here thousands and thousands of Bibles and scriptures were smuggled through the Iron Curtain to many different countries. Of course the spies were in all countries, so the risk was there, and we never, on the telephone, we never talked about the truck or the trailer. We never talked about Soviet Union or Romania or any of these countries by their names. And what it meant was, when we began this operation, the customer in Israel who was importing lumber, his name was Mr. Leo Milner. He didn't know what happened along the way to Israel. He only knew that he gets his real wood. But then when my father and brother Antti bought this truck, they named the truck after the man in Israel. So this truck was called Leo. It's a name of a Finnish man. And in Finland we believe that the wife should follow the husband. So the trailer was then called the wife. And if somebody, very few people knew about this, but if somebody knew and they would talk on the phone, they would say that, they would call and say that, oh, Leo with his wife is traveling. So yes, the secret police was everywhere. These two trips that we made, it was Leo and the trailer was wife. in Finnish, the word for a wife is vaimo. So we would say Leo and his vaimo, which means wife, are traveling together on a trip. Then that was with these lumber piles. And then when we started to transport these house elements, then the truck was renamed and the truck was called Olga. And then Olga went to travel. It was the same truck, but we changed the concept. On the first load, when they came to the Finnish-Soviet border, they had some difficulties on the Finnish side, not because of the load, but a paper was missing and that took some time to obtain that paper. And then they left Finland and went into Soviet Union. And when they entered into Soviet Union at the border, the officers, they opened the tarp of the truck on both sides and the side boards were turned down. And then two soldiers climbed on top of the truck. One had a hammer and he went on one end of the load and the other one went to the other end. And then the one with the hammer would hit each piece of wood with the hammer, and the man on the other side, 4 meters from him, was holding his hand against the wood. And every time when this man hit, the other one said da, da, da. And we consider that that was God's miracle, because in between was this 3.5 meters or so of Bibles, and the Bibles are made out of paper, and that doesn't carry the sound and the impact as the solid wood would do. So that was a difficult moment, but they got through. But on the very first trip, they were so far behind the schedule by the time they left that they then decided that they have to drive non-stop from the Soviet border, Finnish-Soviet border to Chisinau, that they would reach the destination on that time when they had decided that at 23 hour they will meet here. And they were doing this 4-hour shift, every 4 hours changing. And then they both got very tired because they had been already working nights before the trip. And then they changed the shift that they would do 2 hours driving and 2 hours sleep. And then it was somewhere between Leningrad and Chisinau when my father was driving. Antti was sleeping on the bed and my father fell asleep. And the right wheels of the truck went off the road. And in that moment my father woke up and he turned and got the truck back on the road. And that was another miracle, that the trailer didn't roll over. And so they were under a lot of pressure. And by the time they got here, the arrangement was that they will arrive at this certain parking place near Chisinau at 23:00. And Antti told me that they got there at 23:15. So that was, they were on time. But it had been a very difficult journey.
Primul import a fost în 1977, în luna noiembrie. Au fost implicați poate vreo 15 oameni care încărcau blocurile de lemn. Vine un tir din Scandinavia încărcat și o parte din marfă o lăsa aici în Moldova, așa era programat. Dar restul o duceau mai departe, aveau ei marșrutul lor, treceau în România, în Balcani, în cărțile lor acum îi scriu că exportau în Israel case făcute din lemn, exportau lemn din Scandinavia dar cum s-a organizat noi nu cunoaștem, pentru că nu se vorbea, nu se spune. Noi care eram implicați în lucrurile astea ne spune că poate cu o săptămână să ne stăruim, adică șoferii care or să fie cu mașinile să fie gata pe luni, marți, miercuri, săptămâna viitoare. Să fim pe loc, adică eram la curent că a să vină ceva și noi să trebuim. Așa, în linii generale, să vorbim și noi amănunte nu șerem, nu întrebam, ne dădeam seama că nu trebuie multe amănunte să știm.
The first load, my father and brother Antti didn't know what to expect. But by God's grace, it went through. And then the summer 1978, they prepared the second shipment. By that time, they knew what this work means. And I remember as an 11-year-old boy with my sister, two of my sisters, and my brother. And my younger brother, the youngest of us was not born yet. We came to the lumber mill where my father's business was, and it was my mother, then one evangelist from our mission who knew about this work, and brother Antti and my father. And this evangelist then said a prayer and blessed brother Antti and my father for this journey. And I had forgotten this, but then later on I heard from this evangelist that as he had prayed, then my father came to us as children and he shook each one of us our hands and he said goodbye. My father did a test with me because I was the oldest. He had taken my younger siblings to Leningrad before they learned to read, when they were very little, because it made it a little bit easier on the border. I was at the age that I knew how to read, so he couldn't take me because then I would have known that now we're in another country. But then when he had decided in his mind that he would take me to Leningrad on my first trip when I was 15, a long time before, he said to me, I was in the furnace room of our farm, and he was making fire there. Maybe it was a room where he would sometimes talk to me more in a deep way. And he said to me that I have decided to take you and the rest of the family to see the Nordic cross-country ski World Championships event in the city of Lahti. This was a big sports event where the whole world was there, skiing. And he said that, but on one condition. You cannot tell your siblings anything about it. And he said, if you tell, then I cannot take you there. And I didn't understand why he did this, because it was a big temptation to run into the house and tell all my brothers and sisters that Father is taking us to this event. But I knew my father. I knew that if I break this, we will not go. And so I kept the secret. And then eventually came that day that we went to see this ski competition. And then later on, he said to me that you need to get a passport that I will take you on a trip. And then I put the pieces together, and through this I understood that he wanted to test that, can I keep a secret?